In 1975, a short, quiet, completely unremarkable 23-year-old from Leningrad walked into a KGB office and asked for a job. He was nobody, genuinely nobody. Average grades, average looks, average everything. The KGB, apparently having a slow day, said yes. This was probably their biggest mistake since the entire Soviet Union. His name was Vladimir Putin. And this is the story of how one very small man with very large ambitions managed to convince the world's largest country to hand him the keys. Spoiler, it does not end well. For anyone. Let's go back to the beginning. Putin was born on October 7th, 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, which tells you something about how many times Russia has changed its mind about things while Putin has been alive. He grew up poor. Communal apartment, rats in the stairwells. Father worked in a factory, multiple families, sharing one space. The kind of childhood that either breaks you or makes you extremely determined to never be powerless again. Putin chose extremely determined. He was small. He got picked on. So he did what any reasonable child does when they're small and getting picked on. He learned judo, then sambo, then more judo. He trained obsessively. He got very good. He won competitions. And somewhere in all that training, he developed a philosophy that he would apply for the rest of his life. Never show weakness. Strike first. Use your opponent's strength against them. And never, ever let anyone see you sweat. This is a fine philosophy for judo. It is a somewhat alarming philosophy for someone who will eventually control the world's largest nuclear arsenal. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. At 16, Putin decided he wanted to work for the KGB, not be an astronaut, not be a footballer, the secret police. He went to the KGB office as a teenager and asked how to join. They told him to get a law degree first. He went and got a law degree. That's not ambition. That's something closer to obsession. Most teenagers can't decide what to have for lunch. Putin, at 16, had a 20-year career plan involving Soviet intelligence. He graduated in 1975, walked back into the KGB office, and they hired him. So what did the KGB's newest recruit actually do? Mostly paperwork. Genuinely. Putin's KGB career was not James Bond. It was not car chases and secret gadgets and dramatic confrontations. It was sitting in offices, filing reports, monitoring foreigners, looking for people to recruit as informants, and writing everything down in triplicate. He was apparently quite good at the paperwork. In 1985, the KGB rewarded his excellence in paperwork by sending him to Dresden, East Germany. Dresden, not Moscow, not Berlin, not anywhere particularly important. Dresden, a secondary city in a satellite state where Putin's job was to recruit Western agents and gather intelligence and file more reports. He learned German. He ran some informants. He lived in a KGB apartment with his wife and 2 small daughters. He was, by all accounts, a perfectly competent mid-level intelligence officer in a city nobody particularly cared about. And then history happened. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Putin watched it happen from Dresden. An angry crowd gathered outside the KGB building. Putin went outside and told them in German, because he spoke German, which is frankly the most impressive thing he did all decade, that the building was protected and they should leave. They left. Mostly because they wanted to go celebrate at the wall, not because they were particularly scared of a short KGB officer speaking German. Putin then called Moscow for instructions. Moscow didn't answer. He called again. Nothing. The Soviet Empire was collapsing in real time, and the people in charge had apparently decided the best response was to not pick up the phone. Putin has talked about this moment many times. It clearly affected him deeply. The most powerful state in the world, and when one of its officers called during a crisis, nobody answered. He returned to Russia in 1990 with 2 suitcases, a second-hand washing machine he'd bought in Germany, and apparently a burning determination to never be on the wrong end of that phone call again. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The KGB was dissolved. Russia went from superpower to chaos in about 18 months. The 1990s in Russia were, to put it kindly, absolutely terrible. The economy collapsed. Crime exploded. Oligarchs stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and some things that were. Life expectancy dropped. People who had been perfectly comfortable Soviet citizens suddenly found themselves in a country that had no idea what it was doing. Putin got a job working for the mayor of St. Petersburg, and here is where his genuine talent revealed itself. Because Putin's talent was not charisma, it was not speech-making, it was not inspiring people. His talent was being useful and not drawing attention to himself. In a political world full of people screaming for the spotlight, Putin was the quiet one in the corner who just got things done, who could be trusted, who didn't seem to want anything for himself. This was extremely useful to people who had things they needed done quietly. He moved to Moscow in 1996, got a job in the Kremlin, made himself useful there too. In 1998, Boris Yeltsin, who was sick, exhausted, and increasingly desperate for someone he could trust, appointed Putin director of the FSB, the new KGB, the organization Putin had wanted to join since he was 16. He was now running it. In August 1999, Yeltsin appointed him prime minister. On December 31, 1999, Yeltsin went on television, announced he was resigning, and handed Russia to Vladimir Putin. Putin was 47. He had never won a national election. He was unknown to most Russians. He was unknown to most of the world. Western leaders met him and came away impressed. He seemed modern, reasonable. He spoke German. He talked about democracy and cooperation with Europe. George W. Bush looked into his eyes and saw his soul. George W. Bush's soul-reading abilities turned out to be less reliable than advertised. Because what happened next was entirely predictable. If you had been paying attention to literally anything Putin had done in his entire life, he consolidated power, systematically, patiently, without rushing. Independent television stations, gone. The ones that criticized him came under new ownership almost immediately. Journalists who reported uncomfortable things about the Kremlin started having unfortunate accidents. Not all of them, just enough. Political opponents neutralized, some imprisoned, some exiled, some died in ways that were officially accidents and unofficially very convenient. Oligarchs sorted into two categories. Those who stayed out of politics kept their money. Those who funded opposition parties, like Mikhail Khodorkovsky, once the richest man in Russia, went to prison for 10 years. Regional governors, replaced with presidential appointees. Because why have people elect their own local leaders when the president can just pick them? And through all of this, his approval ratings stayed high. Because he also brought something Russia genuinely wanted after the chaos of the 1990s. Stability, order. Rising oil prices meant rising living standards. People's lives got materially better. The deal was simple. Give up your political freedom and we'll give you a functioning state. A lot of Russians took that deal. Some of them are still wondering if it was worth it. By the 2010s, Putin had been in power for over a decade and showed absolutely no signs of leaving. The Constitution said he couldn't serve more than 2 consecutive terms. So he had his friend Dmitry Medvedev serve 1 term as president while Putin was prime minister, then swapped back. The Constitution, it turned out, was more of a suggestion. In 2020, they changed the Constitution to allow Putin to potentially stay in power until 2036. He will be 83 in 2036. And then came the wars. Georgia in 2008. A short, sharp military intervention that told the world Russia was willing to use force to keep its neighbors in line. The world was briefly concerned and then moved on. Ukraine in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea and backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. Western countries imposed sanctions. Putin absorbed them, adapted, kept going. Ukraine in 2022, a full-scale invasion of a sovereign country of 40 million people. The largest land war in Europe since World War II. Cities bombed, hundreds of thousands killed, millions displaced. The world finally paying serious attention, several years too late. All of this from a man who started as a nobody with a judo obsession and a filing job. Here is the thing about Vladimir Putin that the world kept getting wrong. Everyone kept assuming he would eventually become reasonable, that at some point the incentives would align and he would stop, that there was a deal to be made, that he was fundamentally a rational actor who could be managed. What they missed is that Putin is not playing the same game as everyone else. He is not interested in being liked. He is interested in being feared. There is a difference. Liked means you need other people's approval. Feared means you control the terms. The boy who learned judo because he was small and getting picked on grew up to be a man who applied that same logic to geopolitics. Never show weakness. Strike before they expect it. Make the cost of opposing you higher than the cost of accommodating you. It worked for a while for him. It did not work for the hundreds of thousands of people who died in a war that didn't need to happen. For the millions of Ukrainians who lost their homes. For the Russians who lost sons and fathers and brothers to a war sold to them as a 3-day operation. Vladimir Putin started as a nobody. He made himself into someone the entire world has to pay attention to. The question nobody can quite answer is whether that's impressive or just very, very sad. The KGB made him. The Soviet Union that made the KGB collapse 30 years ago. He's still here. Make of that what you will.